Thomas the Tank Engine was very proud when he was given his own branch line. He had a lot to learn, but he was eager to get started. His two coaches, Annie and Clarabelle, taught him how to pull passengers, and his driver helped Thomas to remember where to stop. But there was one station that Thomas always found difficult. Beyond the tunnel is Hackenbeck Halt. There are no signals here. Thomas had to be careful in case there were passengers waiting for him, but when he did have to stop, he overshot the platform every time. Some of the passengers thought it was funny, although some others found it inconvenient. One day, Thomas met kind Edward at the junction. "Hello, Thomas," said Edward. "How are you enjoying your branch line?" "It would be perfect if I knew where to stop," grumbled Thomas. He told Edward all about the halt. "I used to have that problem," smiled Edward, "until I learned a clever trick. What you need to do is find a landmark before the station to remind you when to stop. Then you should be able to stop in the right place without any trouble." Thomas was interested. Will it work? Always. It'll be easy when you know how. Later, Thomas set off to the top station. As he puffed through the tunnel, he remembered Edward's advice. He noticed a stack of hay bales in the field beside the line. "Peep, peep! Brakes, please!" he whistled. The driver put on the brakes, and when Thomas reached the halt, he stopped smoothly at the platform. "It really does work," he puffed happily. So whenever Thomas had to stop at Hackenbeck, he used the hay bales to remember when to slow down, and it worked every time. But one day, Thomas was kept waiting at the junction until James arrived with his train. When he was ready, he tried to make up for lost time. "Don't forget the halt! Don't forget the halt!" warned Danny and Clarabelle. But Thomas wasn't worried. He knew what to do. He whooshed through the tunnel and kept his eyes open for his landmark. He looked and looked, but he couldn't see the hay bales. Suddenly, there was the halt. "Stop, Thomas, stop!" cried the driver. Thomas was surprised. He stopped so quickly that the coaches bumped into him. "Oh, oh, oh!" they cried. "Bother!" groaned Thomas. None of the passengers found it amusing this time. Everyone was very cross and started grumbling at once. "Frightful bump that was! Who do we complain to? I want my money back." At the top station, they indeed complained to the station master. "I'm sorry, sir," sighed Thomas. "I didn't see the hay bales." And he told him what Edward said. The station master laughed. "You are a silly engine," he said kindly. When Edward said to find a landmark, he meant something like a building or a tree, something that's always in the same place. Those hay bales must have been taken away by the farmer, and that's why you couldn't see them. "Oh," said Thomas sadly. "Don't worry," smiled his driver. "No harm done. Now we know what to do for next time, don't we?" In the end, Thomas and his driver used a workman's hut to remind them when to stop at Hackenbeck Halt. And they soon learned how easily.
Thomas the Tank Engine loves his branch line. Whenever he sees people at crossings, stations or bridges, he would whistle to them, and they would always wave back. Most of the time, Thomas sees children. They like watching him puffing along with Annie and Clarabelle. "It's nice when they wave back," says Thomas. "Everyone is so friendly." But one day, while Thomas was collecting passengers, some children arrived on the platform. "Pooh!" said a little boy. "What's that funny smell? It smells like fish, don't it?" Thomas was cross. Not long ago, he had taken fish from the river by mistake, which had given him boiler ache. "It's not funny," he huffed. "Fish can be very uncomfortable for an engine." "Well, you shouldn't have been so careless, should you?" said the boy rudely, and all his friends laughed. Heh 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 heh. Thomas fumed away. Later, he saw some children on a bridge. "Peep, peep, hello," he whistled. But then he saw the rude little boy again. "There he is," he shouted. "It's old Fish Tank. Have you caught any fish for our supper?" Thomas said nothing. He hurried on as quickly as he could. Whenever Thomas came to the same bridge, there was the rude little boy and his friends. They didn't wave at Thomas, they just laughed at him. "Take no notice," soothed Annie. "He'll get tired of it soon," said Clarabelle. One morning it was raining hard. Thomas wanted to stay in the shed, but his driver had said, "No, how would our passengers manage without us?" Thomas puffed through the rain towards the junction. There were no people to wave at him today, but he didn't mind. "At least that rude little boy won't be out in this weather," he told himself. But as they neared the station by the river, he saw the children beside the line. They were waving and shouting, "Stop! Stop!" Thomas's driver stopped the train. "What are you doing here?" he asked sternly. "You can't play on the railway line." "We're not playing," said the children. "We need help. One of our friends has fallen in the river. We can't get him out on our own." Thomas's driver and fireman acted quickly. They told the guard what had happened, then they found some rope and went to the bridge. Thomas waited anxiously. It wasn't long before they returned with a very wet, unhappy little boy. Then Thomas realised it was the rude little boy who had teased him. "We need to get him to the next station," said the driver. "He's very cold." "I won't go," huffed Thomas. "It serves him right for being rude." Annie and Clarabelle were shocked. "You're being rather rude yourself," scolded Annie. "And what about our passengers?" added Clarabelle. "They'll be late if we don't leave." Thomas remembered this, and he was sorry at once. The guard helped the children onto the train, and they set off again. When they reached the station, they brought out a blanket and a hot drink to keep the boy warm. "Thank you, Thomas," shivered the little boy. "I'm sorry I teased you." "That's all right," smiled Thomas. "Now you know how I felt with fish in my boiler. Next time, be more careful when you're near the river." The little boy soon got better. He doesn't tease Thomas anymore. Now he stands by the bridge and waves to him as he passes by. And Thomas always whistles hello in return.